My name is Monica Kramer. I believe at this time I have hypokalemic periodic paralysis and paramyotonia congenita. And my role is I am currently the treasurer with the Periodic Paralysis Association. When I was younger, I had a lot of odd symptoms. Usually they would think that it was, they would say it was growing pains. I had problems with my stomach. And then when I was a teenager, I started having these episodes where I was very weak, couldn't walk very well, but I also was very active. And so I thought, oh, maybe I just overdid it yesterday. And then it wasn't until my 20s when I started having more episodes of this weakness to the point where I couldn't really lift a cup to drink water or walk to the bathroom. And I could, but it was very difficult. And at that time, they diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome. And then when I was about 35, things started to get really weird, and I was having difficulty walking and standing to the point where, again, very active. I used to drag a plastic lawn chair everywhere I went. So I'd walk a few steps, sit down in the chair. Walk a few steps, sit down in the chair. And I was just trying to find a way to live with my chronic fatigue syndrome. And I went to a rheumatologist. I had where my hands would not function. And I knew at that appointment, this is bad. Whatever this is bad. And then I also had where my eyes were, the muscles in my eyes were not supporting my eye function. So I had to keep my eyes closed. And the doctor just said, open your eyes for 2 seconds. And I did. And she looked at my mother and said, she needs to go to the Mayo Clinic right now. I went home. It was a morning appointment. My mom drove me home. She got me into my bed, and we waited for my primary care doctor to call to say, yes, I'm giving you permission to go to the Mayo. We waited all day, and at the end of the day, my mother was on the phone, and she was like, I need to speak to the doctor. And the doctor said, if she's that bad, just take her to the emergency room. And it was at that time when I went to try to get out of bed to go to the emergency room, I totally went paralyzed for the first time ever. And I was able to speak, but I was dead weight.
See footage. Will the dog stay?
I got very euphoric, and that does happen still to this day. When my body sometimes will just go through a shift, and I will just start laughing, hysterical, and I just feel amazing. It's better than the fear and the anxiety, but it's still something that just kind of comes and goes. And I went to the emergency room. They thought I had meningitis, and they did a spinal tap. They thought I had had a stroke because I had facial palsy. My blood pressure would skyrocket over 200 for no reason, and I ended up in the hospital for 9 days. Finally, they discharged me and had me go to Mayo Clinic. So after I was released from the hospital, 2 days later I went to Mayo. That was the first time I was diagnosed with a psychogenic or psychological disorder. They thought it was psychological. My blood work came back, really odd things in my blood work with my everything basically. Everything was out of whack. And so they were like, well, maybe it's autoimmune because my immune system had shown some weird things and I had broken out with weird rashes and stuff. And so I went to an immunologist, and the immunologist said, there's definitely something going on here. I think it might be MS. So he sent me to the leading doctor at the time in Orlando for MS, and he reviewed my case and said, yes, send her to me. And he took a look at my case, and he sent me to a movement specialist because they thought possibly, because I also would have these muscle contractions, my body would become very stiff. And they thought maybe it was stiff man syndrome. So they sent me to Shands, and this is where it was, I started to get emotional. Sorry. This doctor I saw at Shands, it's fate. It's definitely fate. By the grace of God, the resident or intern, she comes in and my mom is there and she starts asking me all these questions. And then she turns and she looks at me and she says, I think it's either stiff man syndrome or hypokalemic periodic paralysis. And she had just finished being on this research for hypokalemic periodic paralysis. So that's the only reason why she knew that this is definitely some form of periodic paralysis. And she didn't know for sure, but because in my blood work, I had times where my potassium was low, that's why she went with hypokalemic periodic paralysis. They sent the letter over to my neurologist and he was so impressed by her that he actually wrote a letter back to them saying, I'm impressed. Like, you guys, not only the way she handled it, but how the doctor that she was under handled it. And that's when he said, I actually have another patient and I'm gonna ask her if it's okay if I connect the two of you. And that's when Linda and I met. And that was like 12, 15 years ago. And that's when I saw the footage of Jake, because now I had a name of what I could look at. And I watched that video and I was like, that's me. One of the women that came to a conference, she put it really well. She was like, I feel like I'm on the mothership. You know, you feel like you're within, you know, you've landed on your planet, you know, and because we're mutants, right? So it's, you know, and you all come together and you see other people having episodes and you just feel, wow, like this is my tribe, like I found my people. If it was not for my chance meeting of Linda Feld and being introduced to the Periodic Paralysis Association, I would have definitely given up. And I would not have the quality of life that I have. So the resources, the emotional support that they provided and the community provided is why I'm a member of the board. Periodic paralysis for me is like having a temperamental toddler. And at any time, it's just gonna throw a fit, make a scene, throw itself on the floor, and your whole day now has to change. And you know, it's running this little crabby baby has decided that you're not going anywhere today, you're staying home, and everything you planned is off the table now. So because I don't present the way most people present with periodic paralysis or anything else really, my body can go into paralysis, full paralysis. I can look like I'm totally unconscious, but I'm there. I can have what looks like a seizure, which my whole body will contract. My muscles will contract so much that it will distort my wrists, my arms. Not only does it make my muscles contort, but it will give me facial palsy, like one side of my face will sag. So they kept thinking we must be missing something. So they've done a lot of study on that. And so but every time came back, it's psychogenic. But what we found though, was that if it is paramyotonia or some form of myotonia, those muscle contractions that they are picking up on those seizure studies could be coming from the muscle contractions of the myotonia. And that would explain why I got that misdiagnosis. The hardest part about periodic paralysis for me personally is this darkness. I mean, you don't know when it's gonna come in. You don't know when it's going to step into your life and just wreck it. It can just come in and take over. And it's trying to build your life and always in the back of your mind, having plan B. And that's exactly what happened on my wedding day. I was in the hospital 2 weeks before my wedding day. My episode was lingering. I was in a wheelchair. My goal on my wedding day was to walk down the aisle and have my first dance. What I've learned throughout this whole journey is you have to stay positive and you have to find a way to laugh and make light of some of the tough times. And you might not be able to laugh about it in the moment, but be able to revisit it and say, wow, man, you remember that day? That was crazy. And, and there's also, it can be embarrassing, especially when you're out in public. I was at the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World and had an episode, and I shared with the paramedics, because luckily I made it behind the scenes, but they still had to wheel me through. And they said to me, we can cover you up with towels, because that's all they had were, Disney beach towels. So sure enough, as I'm coming out, my mom was like, everybody had their cameras out and I didn't see anybody. I was under the towels and I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, is this gonna be all over? Now I look back and I laugh, like, who wants to video that? I mean, you're at Disney World, this is what you're videoing? But it's just being able to look back on those moments and just be like, you know what, I made it through, it's not that big of a deal. And then every day just realizing, okay, yeah, my life is hard, but there are other people whose lives are much harder. And just trying to find the happiness in every moment.
If you would like to know more about periodic paralysis, visit periodicparalysis.org. And if you enjoyed this video and want more, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit that bell so you don't miss any future videos. It really does help spread the word. You can view other videos about periodic paralysis by clicking the thumbnails to the right. If you have questions, just leave a comment below or reach out to us on social media. We'd love to hear from you.